First things first, we would like to do a little bit of a land acknowledgement here. So we would like to begin by acknowledging Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. So wherever you're zooming in from, while we meet today on a virtual platform, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands we each call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. So, from coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, the Métis, and First Nations people that call this land home. So, just join me in a moment of reflection to acknowledge the effect of residential schools and colonialism, Indigenous families and communities, and to consider how we each, in our own way, can move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. All right. So I'm Cass. I'm new. I'm one of the directors for WGC. With me today, I have Riddy, Chelsea, Irna, and Lauren. I believe that's everyone from the board here. And then our guest speaker today is Susan. Susan is going to be doing this webinar on creating a safer workplaces in mining. So she's a PGeo. She's president of the Lionsgate Geological Consulting Incorporation and Mindshift. She'll share her stories and experiences in the mining industry from her 38-year career as a geologist. She started the Me Too Mining Association in the spring of 2018, developed a bystander intervention training program for the mining industry, and involved MTMA into the Mindshift Foundation in 2023. She was included in Women in Mining UK's 2018 list of 100 Global Inspirational Women in Mining. So that's pretty cool, actually. Join us for an inspiring and thought-provoking conversation about leadership, advocacy, and the path towards safer and more inclusive mining industry. Yeah, and just a reminder to everyone to keep yourself muted throughout the presentation. Feel free to type any questions or comments you have into the chat. We will be monitoring it, but there will also be a Q&A portion at the end as well. So yeah, it's over to you, Susan.
Well, thank you very much, Cass. As she mentioned, I have been in the mining industry quite a while. It seems very odd to say 38 years, but that is how long it has been. I still run my consulting company, and all the work that we do at Mindshift is a volunteer for all of our board members, and we have one paid executive director. We've been fortunate enough to pass on a lot of the load to her, and she's doing a really great job. But it did start as the Me Too Mining Association back in 2018, early 2018, with a tweet that I put on Twitter. And I remember sitting there in front of what I had written, which was, it's time to start the conversation. We need to talk about women's experience of sexual assault and sexual harassment in the mining industry. And I sat there, I typed it out, and I sat there and I looked at it for about 10 or 15 minutes, thinking, this is it. I am wiping out all of the years of my career at that point. So I guess it was around 30 years back then. But I had to do it. I could not do it. And so I hit post or whatever it was. But it was a really positive experience in the end. It really did start a conversation. And through that conversation and through media stories, through speaking at conferences, it really grew. And that conversation really did start with, especially with people coming up and telling me their stories. And we were so focused as the Me Too Mining Association on women. But then I started hearing from men. And men were telling me their stories of being bullied in the workplace and their stories of sexual harassment and sexual assault. LGBTQ plus community telling me their stories. And so I knew we had to broaden it. And always at the end of these stories, it ended with, I didn't know what to do, or what should I have done? What could I have done? And I didn't have an answer for that at the beginning when we first started this. We were just trying to get people to talk. Well, but now we needed to be able to offer some guidance and some help. Um, and we came upon bystander intervention because we don't know intuitively a lot of the time what to do or what to say when something happens. What is the most effective action that somebody can take? So I took a year off my running my consulting company, and I just researched workplace culture, and we came up with our digger program on bystander intervention specifically built for the mining industry. And we also transitioned to the Mindshift Foundation, just to be way more inclusive of not only um, including sexual harassment, but bullying and racism and intimidation. A lot of the what we call inappropriate workplace behaviors. So we just want to go to work and be safe. We want to go to work and focus on our work and have social interactions, but in a healthy and positive way, and to know what to do when something happens.
Hey, Susan. I think your note screen is blocking.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
okay, there we go. It's gone now.
Sorry. Right. Let me get that off of there. Now I've,
All right, I think we're clear now. It's clear for me.
yeah, I'll just
Oh,
put it
it's
over here.
back now.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's gone.
okay, perfect. Thanks.
Um, as I always give this to everybody that I will be talking about some uncomfortable and difficult subjects throughout this. So if you feel overwhelmed after a while, because sometimes repetition of these words can be challenging and bring things up, just take care of yourself and step away if you need to and come back when you feel more comfortable. So part of this, we do a lot of work on site safety when we're on sites or working at a mine, and we build these safety toolkits. And for psychological safety, as we're calling it now, you can build a toolkit for that too. If there's anything that I say today that resonates with you or makes sense for you, have a notebook handy and write it down. If there's a phrase that I say that you think I could say that, I could do that, write it down. A lot of this that I'm going to be talking about is on our website that I have at the bottom of every slide. So you can go there for reference or look up other ideas that we have there. So I will be sharing some stories that I have from the mining industry. And there are also a lot of news stories that have been in the press, particularly since around 2016, 2017. There were other stories before that, but there was a real explosion around those years, particularly in Australia when they had a big exposure of women standing up and sharing their stories with the media because they weren't being heard by the companies. And that instigated a big inquiry in Western Australia that is references to it, and their final report are on our website, and a lot of the submissions to that inquiry. Unfortunately, I found that they were so focused on, I mean, it was really called sexual harassment of women in fly-in, fly-out camps of Western Australia. So I was sad that they didn't include men. I was sad that they were so specific to fly-in, fly-out camps. But there was a lot of really important information that came out of that. And BHP did end up getting rid and firing a lot of serial harassers that were known within some of these work sites that they had, but had never been dealt with before properly. And they started really cleaning house. On the other side of the screen, there are a lot of stories from Canadian experiences within the Inuit community, within the Indigenous community, um, and just also within geology. Women having struggles with working up in the tundra and somebody breaking into their rooms and stealing some of their personal items. The media is more willing to talk about these stories, and they are coming forward a lot more often. But it was interesting. I started my career in 1987, and this is a chart of participation of women in the mining and gas extraction industries um, across since really the beginning of my career. And you can see it's not very encouraging. It was about 14, 15% when I started, and we've tipped over 20 maybe a couple of times, but mostly we're sitting at 18 or 19%. Unfortunately, there is no exit interview. We don't know why a lot of women that come into the industry have left. We can, from our own experiences, we can kind of get an idea of what's going on, but we don't have any specific data on it. But women are coming in and women are leaving, and we need to do better. We need to have a better workplace culture so that everybody feels safe and everybody stays. Some of the earliest experiences that I had really in my first job was working undergrad in a mine when I got out of university just outside of Timmins Camp. And being a first job, I was just learning so many things, but I was hired to work at the mine, but they wouldn't allow me to work underground. I was just logging core that was coming from the underground exploration that they were doing. And I wasn't allowed underground. I was specifically told it was because I was a woman and it wasn't safe for me to be there. It was really frustrating, but I needed that first job and I was getting a lot of good experience logging the core, but I couldn't see what the rocks looked like underground and there was no exposure on surface. But I was there for 3 months. I was logging core, and then a new chief geologist came in, and he really advocated. He became such a strong ally for me, and advocated to the mine manager to let me work underground. And so, I eventually he acquiesced, and I was allowed to work underground. But now the samplers that I was working with very harmoniously on surface, I was now their boss underground for underground sampling, and that became an issue for them. And suddenly my work area was just literally wallpapered with hundreds of pornographic pictures. I'd walk in every day to my logging area, and even the windows were covered with it. So I would take them down, put them in an envelope, and I didn't want to bring this up to my superiors. I felt like to handle this by myself because I felt really tenuous in being there to begin with. And if I needed special circumstances, I think it would have been a challenge for them to keep me. Well, that's what I felt anyway. And so I tried to handle it myself and I just kept taking them down and putting them. And eventually the chief sampler got so mad at me that he came storming into the geology office where I was alone at the time and was just yelling and slamming his fists on the table and saying if I ever touched his pictures again, he was going to put my hands in the rock crusher and break all my fingers, and just really violent, really aggressive. And I was just stunned. I didn't know what to do. And but I did tell the chief geologist about it, and he went and talked to the mine manager, and they were kind of had a finger waved at them and told them this wasn't okay and it was to stop. And that was it. I still had to work with them, so it was a very tense kind of situation. And there were great jobs and there were really challenging jobs like that in the past 38 years for me. Really changed when I started my own consulting company and worked for who I wanted, really. Let's go through some numbers because when we started this, there really weren't any studies, just really small studies that were out there on the experiences of women and men in the mining industry. But this is a really important study that came out of the US, and it's really just like corporate offices. But what this study shows is that they asked women and men in these offices um, what their experiences were with gender discrimination, either personally experiencing it or observing it. And 85% of the men said they hadn't observed or seen or heard about any gender discrimination happening to the women that they were working with. So they didn't think it existed, while 42% of the women said they'd had those experiences. Same thing with sexual harassment. 38% of the women reported in this survey that they'd had experiences with sexual harassment, but 77% of the men said they hadn't seen it, so they didn't think it was around, and that their company was good. So it's really important from the study. The takeaway is that because the men weren't seeing it, they didn't think it was happening. They didn't have that same lived experience that the women were having. So wherever you are, you can't assume that it's not happening somewhere. You have to assume that it's there. These surveys are so consistent. 35, 40%, 25% of women are experiencing sexual harassment in the workplace. But they're not the only ones. This is a real important survey from the Yukon and Northern BC about the experiences of Indigenous women in mining camps, where 73% of them have experienced some form of sexual, racial harassment, discrimination, and violence while in the work camp. Of course, 55% of them, they just don't feel safe while they're there. And most of them don't report because there wasn't any option or process for reporting that they were having these experiences. It wasn't clear. They didn't know if there was any at all, or they just didn't feel safe to use it. So it's really important to be aware of these experiences having higher numbers in different groups of workers that may be in the camp that you're in. And then we had the Rio Tinto and the Goldfield reports that came out. And these were just really groundbreaking for us. And we were so surprised and so thankful that they were released publicly. Because I knew intuitively that men were being sexually harassed in the mining industry, but we had no numbers, and now we did. So in both these companies, 23 to 30% of the women reported experience of sexual harassment, and 7% of the men, which sounds like such a small number. But when I worked through the number of employees that these companies have as full-time employees, they didn't survey the contractors, and use those percentages, and 80% male dominated as they self-reported, or 76 male dominated at Goldfields. 2,700 women were sexually harassed in the workplace at Rio Tinto, and 2,500 men. It's the same amount of people. 1,130 women at Goldfields experienced sexual harassment, and 1,136 men experience sexual harassment. We need to invite men to the conversation. Men are being targeted by this behavior within the mining industry also, but we're not giving them a voice to talk about it. And that's really important. They need to be invited to these surveys. They need to be invited to help finding solutions, not just the aggressors or the perpetrators or the harassers. They are also being targeted. 50% of workers are being bullied in these operations for Rio Tinto and Goldfield. That's huge. And bullying has such a strong impact on people. These numbers were incredible to get. And these reports, again, they're referenced on our website. They're really important to read. And there's some really good suggestions for solutions for these behavior. And one of them in both those reports is bystander intervention training, so people know what to do and know what to say. Let's talk about what some of these behaviors are and what the impacts on people, what they are. Inappropriate workplace behaviors can include racism, bullying, even microaggressions. I think we've all probably experienced some of those assumptions that are made about your abilities, comments that are made about, oh, can you take notes? Oh, can you get the water for everybody that's here? It's really frustrating, and I don't see it as much as I used to back in the day, but they still exist, and they're just little, but they're not really micro on their impact. Their impact can be huge, especially when it's repeated behavior that you're constantly experiencing. Sexual harassment, just in terms of a common understanding, words, gestures, graphic images, behaviors of a sexual nature, even physical contact of some form. It's unwelcome. You're not consenting to it. It can be a series of events, or just one big single event of sexual harassment. It's meant to be offensive and it's meant to be humiliating. And it just brings that condition of sexual involvement in a workplace, which can impact trading opportunities. It can impact promotions, particularly if this person is more senior to the target of this behavior. And sexual assault is physical contact of some form of a sexual nature that is not consented to. And sexual assault in a remote site requires an action plan. There should be actions in place already so that everybody knows what to do when something like that happens, and definitely outreach to a crisis center so that that person can have immediate care and attention and extraction so that they can get the help that they need. There's a lot of relationships that can happen within camps, within offices. I met my husband while at work, but these relationships versus sexual harassment or sexual assault, of course, obviously, are very different situations. There is consent, there is connection, there is communication, there's mutual respect. And consent is such an important thing, and we all need to understand exactly what that is. Consent needs to be clearly stated, and you cannot assume that it's there. It has to be given voluntarily with no influence of coercion or alcohol or drugs. Um, and consent can be withdrawn at any moment. A person has a right to change their mind and shouldn't hesitate. You should feel very strongly if you're not comfortable with what's happening, you can say, no, we're going to stop now. Consent is really important, and we have to feel confident in what's happening. Now, the impacts of some of the or all of these inappropriate behaviors can and start off really sort of on a lighter level, but still very negative feelings. There's annoyance. It's really embarrassing that this is happening to you, especially if it's in front of other people. The thing with a lot of these behaviors, they don't happen in front of a lot of people. They happen in the dark. They happen on the side. They happen in the loneliness and when in the aloneness. It can be shame, humiliation, and anger. Of course, you're going to lose trust. You're not going to feel safe. There are some people that lowers their self-esteem. They feel very impacted by these behaviors, particularly repetitive use of these behaviors. You don't want to go to work. You don't want to be there. Increased absenteeism, distracted, lower productivity, loss of promotions. These things are now getting more serious with more increased absenteeism, financial distress, stress and anxiety, deepening into depression, panic attacks, PTSD, serious cases, physical injury, and in some cases, even death have occurred based on some of these behaviors on work sites. There is impact on the coworkers if you're around and you hear, you observe that these behaviors are happening. Coworkers are also not going to feel safe in this workplace, particularly if these behaviors are not being addressed. If it happens to them, it can happen to me. You can feel ineffective and powerless if you don't know what to do, and you can feel guilty and stressed because you didn't do anything about it, because it doesn't occur to you till later. Oh, I could have said something, I could have done something, but you didn't know what to say. Stress for not intervening can divide a workplace. People pick sides. They think they know what happened or know what's going on. Often they don't. Workers can become distracted and concerned. And who wants to work in an environment that is so stressful and so negative like that, that there are many opportunities these days for work someplace else. In terms of the whole workplace and the community, morale can decrease, productivity can decrease, workers leave, errors because of distraction and injury, increased costs because of litigation for the company and investigations if reports are filed. So, bystander intervention in the workplace. What does it mean? What does it look like? What what is it? In any scenario, any situation that's happening, um, there can be different kinds of bystanders that are present. Complicit bystanders are the worst case scenario. They are people that are going to join in to what's happening. They're going to laugh at the aggressor, with the aggressor, at the targeted person. They're going to support them, and they may even step in and start participating in what's going on. And that can have a huge impact on a workplace or a camp, because now, particularly bystanders or observers, coworkers, aren't going to feel safe. It's a very negative culture when this kind of behavior happens. And it really tends to spread that other people, okay, well, they can do it, I can do it. So it's just really hugely very negative on everybody around there. Passive bystanders just kind of watch what's happening. There's no expression on their face. They may actually kind of pick up their phone and not record or anything, but just paying attention to what's happening, but just observing it, or they may just walk away and walk past. Um, this also has a very negative impact, because just like with complicit bystanders, a harasser will take these two kind of behaviors and take them as support, because nobody's saying no to them. They're actually saying yes. So it encourages them and it empowers them to continue this behavior. Active bystanders will step in, will intervene, will address the harassment in an appropriate and safe way. And we'll get to that when we go through Digger. Active bystanders have a very positive impact on the work site or the workplace. Their behaviors, because people are seeing it and observing that somebody is stepping in, it tends to spread. They feel empowered to step in, and they'll observe how that situation was handled. And so it can spread and have a very positive impact on a workplace. The goals of an active bystander is, well, safety is really important. Stop harm in the moment, but only when that's possible. Sometimes it's not safe. Sometimes it's not safe to do it alone. You need more people with you. Your goal is to de escalate a situation. We don't attack the harasser, we attack their behavior. We don't even attack it, we address their behavior or their comments. But we don't escalate the situation, we don't engage with them in a negative way. It's de escalation. That is the goal, and to have a positive impact on the people observing or the person that's being targeted. So we're going to get into Digger now. And just like a lot of situations that we walk into in a mine, in an exploration camp, it's assess the situation. What's going on as far as you can tell? Is everybody okay? Is everybody safe? If it's just a comment, the safety isn't a priority, is such a big deal. But if it's an aggressive encounter, safety can be a really important thing for the person that's considering being an active bystander in that scenario. And what is the safety of the person being targeted? So this is Digger. And as we go down the Digger acronym there, what we consider is the safety of the target and the safety of the bystander. And if you are the target and there is no other bystander, these steps really do work still within a solo situation that you may be dealing with. So, direct actions. So, we're making a statement on what is being said or what is being done. We are not attacking the harasser. That is not funny. That is not okay. Your behavior is not okay. It needs to stop. These are phrases that anybody can use. Anybody can leave me alone, leave her alone, leave him alone, leave them alone as a smaller group. Don't say that to me. Don't say that to her. Or back away from me right now. They're just phrases that are out there. And what I really always recommend to people, because for me, always in the past, I would think of the most perfect thing to say 5 or 10 minutes after the situation had already dissipated. What I started doing was I had a piece of paper beside a mirror and I had some of these phrases there. And I would say them when I was alone, loud and directly, so that it's a snap, right? You're getting these phrases out there and they don't come naturally for a lot of people. So if you practice saying them, they actually do come quicker in the moment when you need them. But you have to find those phrases that work for you. So writing some of these down, coming up with your own, listening to what other people say in these kinds of situations. So that, look, that's not very funny. Can we get back to what we were just talking about, what we're working on if you're in sort of a team meeting? Redirect what the focus. That wasn't really appropriate. Can we just focus on what we're here to do? Just phrases like that. And if they work, great. If that person continues, then maybe we need to go to some of the other steps. Indirect actions. These are really important. If it's, maybe you're dealing with someone who's more of a superior and it's difficult to say something to them, particularly in front of a lot of other people. Indirect actions are also good when there's a lot of aggression, there's a lot of tension. And really, as a bystander, your goal is to get that target out of that space, get them safely in a safe way. And a lot of that involves just interrupting. Hey, what's going on here? Hey, there's a phone call for you. Do you want to, come? I'll show you where it is. Or I just heard you being called on the radio. Getting that person out, disrupting. Everybody walks around with water bottles or coffee mugs or whatever. Just drop it on the floor, make a mess, make a noise. Everybody gets redirected to what that was. And then even that targeted person has that moment to realize I can go, I can get out of here now. There is a distraction that's happened. Start a completely different conversation. Hey, did you watch that hockey game last night? Oh my God, it was so close. Whatever it was, it really wasn't close the other night, but you can, I think the most impactful thing that you can do, if it's possible, is call somebody in. And that's waiting till after, finding that person if you know them, or if you know somebody they know, like a really good ally, a really good manager who has a way of talking to people. But calling somebody in is talking to them outside in the quiet and saying, look, I heard what you said in that meeting. And I really want to have a discussion with you about it. I want you to explain what you meant by that. And that's even a good one in a direct action. Whoa, what did you mean by that? Or can you repeat that again? That takes away that power that that person had if they have to repeat it, or if, you know, they have to kind of think about it again. And well, it was just a joke. Well, it wasn't really. A lot of people really didn't find it very funny. But calling somebody in, have a discussion. Can you explain that to me, what you meant by that? Because it really had an impact on me. And it reminded me of some other things that other people had said. But trying to open up that conversation with them, that's where growth happens. Calling somebody out in front of everybody can bring shame into their experience of that. And shame just stunts any growth that somebody can have from a situation. And it emboldens them to even keep going with it. So, not using shame and having a conversation with someone actually promotes growth and understanding and conversation. depending on who that person is. Sometimes that's not going to work for everybody either. It's not safe to act alone. You can get colleagues, you can get other active bystanders involved. When there's more than one or two, or when there's more than three people, at least, according to bystander theory, they're less likely that anybody's going to react to what's going on in that situation. Having somebody break that sort of hesitancy to step in. Hey, are we okay with this? Hey, can we do something here? Actually breaks that fear that everybody has of stepping in. They don't feel they have that authority. They don't feel empowered to do anything. They think someone else can step in and deal with that situation. So just breaking that for everybody is like, hey, this isn't okay. Can we stop this? Do you want to get out of here now? Can you guys like just keep this person here and talk to them, and I'll get this person out. It's just having more people around can make people feel safer to step in and do something. Again, in the most unsafe situations, sometimes you just need to get an authority. You need to get a security guard, a safety officer, depending on where you are, or a manager, a supervisor. And sometimes in very violent situations, you have to call in the authorities. Um, it can be more challenging to take this step because it is a bit more risk taking. It feels like such a big step to take. But if somebody is in danger, if you're in danger, then you need to call in an authority to help you deal with a situation that may not be safe for you to act alone in. And getting that help for somebody will help them in the long run. And this is the part that really surprises a lot of people, that everybody thinks bystander intervention is standing up, saying something right in the moment. And we know that that's not always something that we can do in that moment or something that is safe to do. Because the most important thing that an active bystander can do is to talk to the person that something just happened to. So if the situation breaks up and you see them walk away and you know where they're going, walk up to them and say, "Are you okay?" You think back on all of maybe the negative experiences that have ever happened to you. And if somebody had actually come up to you and said, "Are you okay? I saw what just happened to you. And I just wanted to let you know that I saw it. And I'm wondering if you're okay. And what can I do to help? What do you need right now? Do you need to get on the phone and talk to family, to talk to friends, to connect to somebody that you really know and that you know loves you? Um, what do you need? And you know what? I'm really sorry that just happened to you. And I'm going to write down what I saw and I'm going to send it to you in an email or give them that piece of paper. Um, but connect with them, empathize with them, listen to them, find them the help that they need at that time, and then send them in some form, use an email, a text, or something to their personal email address, and use your personal email address, not a work one, and send them a summary of what you saw. And I will just share a quick story on this because our vice president, Julia Gartley, had an experience with a friend who called her and told her that she had just experienced being sexually assaulted. And as difficult as that was for Julia to listen to, obviously she did. She just let this person talk. And after she was finished and had talked with her for quite a while, they ended their conversation. She took a piece of paper out and she wrote down all of the details that she could remember that her friend had just told her. She didn't send it to her right away. She kept it for when her friend was ready. And a few weeks later, her friend phoned her and said that she was ready to file charges and that she was going to pursue this through the legal system. And this person was in the US. And so she said, you know what? I wrote down some notes from when you first called me, and I'm going to send these to you now. And someone else had done that for her. And both of those notes, both of those people, other people writing down the details that had dissipated in her memory a little bit, little things that she couldn't remember later on. Those were very key to the prosecution, the successful prosecution of the person that assaulted her. So, writing these things down, which is really our next slide here, the record part. Observing or having somebody share their experience with you, particularly maybe after it just happened, and making a record, keeping a notebook of some of the details of incidents. And sometimes, particularly in these large industrial camps, there are serial harassers and assaulters that exist within these camps. So sometimes there's behavior that is like testing the water. It's very jokey at first, and then it just keeps escalating. And a lot of particularly women feel that once things escalate and maybe it crosses a line that you haven't really drawn yet, but now you're realizing, oh, okay, this isn't going where I want it to go. I don't feel comfortable anymore. The minute you start feeling even a little bit mildly uncomfortable, start writing down the details of what's happening. It may not go anywhere, it may not add to anything, but sometimes these are testing the water behaviors and things will just continue to escalate. And when it crosses a boundary that you no longer feel comfortable with, you are okay to stand up and say, this is not okay anymore. I am not comfortable anymore. But if it doesn't stop, you have a record of how it started, how it escalated. You had that boundary that you said, I want this to stop, and maybe it continued. Because going to file a report and having that record of how things escalated is really important for the reporting process because it gives you that history of the behavior. So it's really important if even if you hear a story that later might become important for somebody. There's a documentary called Picture a Scientist, and she wrote down, she reported 20 years after she had been sexually harassed in a camp in Antarctica because she needed to finish her master's and her PhD. And then she needed to get tenure because this was a tenured professor that was serially having this behavior. And she didn't feel safe until she had that extra level of tenure at a university. And then she filed a Title X report against that professor. And she talked to a geologist that was working with her on that site in Antarctica, and he had no idea that this was happening to her. He sort of saw her laughing with the guy or just not engaging with him, but she didn't talk to him and say, I'm not happy with this. I'm really uncomfortable. She just masked it out. But it really impacted her very deeply, the behavior that that person had. So writing things down, having a record, even if it's many years later, that that record matters. It's important to have it. And all this list of things to record is on our website. Record, sorry, report an incident. It's really important to report to your company. Many of them have much better reporting options now than they used to. There's also informal reporting. You can talk to a manager that you feel safe with talking to. If you don't feel comfortable going to a direct reporting line, but talk to your company because companies get to say, we don't have any reports of incidents, so it's not happening in our company. And we know that in most cases, yes, it is happening in most companies, but women don't feel safe or there is no adequate reporting system. If that is the case, or you report and there isn't a satisfactory outcome, there are follow-up options that you have. Some people work for a union outside of being a professional, and so unions are good outlets to report to. Legal counsels, employment lawyers will take an hour, listen to a story, give you what your options are. Yes, you have good legal recourse here. Let's move forward. Well, maybe a legal recourse isn't your best option here. Here maybe are some other options. Workmen's Compensation Board, particularly here in BC, is becoming they have a hotline, a 24-hour hotline that you can call if you're being bullied in the workplace and your workplace isn't doing anything about it. Um, Professional associations are starting to take this behavior because it's unethical and it's unprofessional if that other person is a registered professional with an association. Even this year in BC, we had to do watch an ethical, or review an ethical paper that they had put together on for our continuation for our education. And one of the incidents that they talked about, should this be reported to the association, involved inappropriate behavior and sexual harassment of an employee. Should you report this? The answer that you were supposed to pick yes, no, or maybe, the answer was yes. You should report it to the professional association. So be aware that that is an option. Human rights commissions and tribunals it's a slow and painful process, but they are getting more and more financial compensation for these kinds of behaviors, particularly if the company doesn't deal with them appropriately or effectively. I know we're running out of time, so actually I'm not going to run through a scenario, but normally when we give this course, we put groups into breakout rooms and we actually give real world scenarios that have happened to some of us on the board of Mindshift, stories that I've heard. So they're real life scenarios in exploration camps, in offices, in mines, in mills, at conferences that happen to people. And we talk about them. What are the impacts? What are some of the actions that can be used to resolve this situation? And that's a really impactful part of the process, because actually talking about these scenarios out loud with other people really normalizes it a lot better, particularly if it's an enterprise-wide training session. The people that you're working with are having that conversation with your coworkers for the first time, probably, that you're talking about such important aspects of working together. Everybody has a common language. Everybody has a common goal to do better, to step up for each other, to be each other's allies. And these scenarios can be really impactful on a lot of people. And some people even share some of their own experiences that they've had. I had a diamond driller who ran his own diamond drilling company attend one of these with the exploration company that he worked with. And he really opened up about the bullying that he'd experienced and observed throughout his whole career. And he was quite an older gentleman, and he was getting quite emotional being able to talk about it, probably for the very first time within one of these breakout rooms. So the growth that happens is really quite impactful. So I'm going to try and just get through this. There we go. Most of my career, I had to slap on a lot of layers of armor to go to work in a lot of situations that I was in. So I peeled off all of that armor just since really starting this work, and being able to go to work and not have all those layers of armor to protect me from a lot of the behaviors that were happening around me is a really incredible difference for me, of going to work as my authentic self, being able to interact with people. And I'm also in my 60s now, so I really don't care what a lot of people think. And you do become more vocal and more empowered when you don't feel so much at risk like a younger person or early career person might feel. Let's get to that last one. So that's it. I'd love to listen to any questions or observations that anybody might have.
Honestly, Susan, we really just wanted to thank you for this talk. I just want to start by saying how sorry that we are about your experience, but we also want to thank you for being so vulnerable and talking to us about it, especially because this is such a hard topic, and it needs to be talked about more often. There's a few things that I'll just go over briefly that resonated with me is especially when um, people are just starting their career, they are very vulnerable, like you mentioned, and often not sometimes people can think that this is a normal behavior. It's just the work life banter, or it's just the normal behavior. So when coming out of school, there's already a sense from females that it is a male dominated industry, and that especially younger people getting into the industry feel like they need to be quiet in order it doesn't impact their career moving forward. And I also think Cass and Chelsea mentioned this in the chat that male or female, everyone needs someone to talk to. And because there is unfortunately still a stigma with male sexual assault, men can feel like they can't talk to their colleagues about what is happening. And so this is a very important conversation that we need to have and we need to keep having. So I just wanted to thank you. Does anyone in the chat have any questions that they would like to any question or any comments that they would like to bring up?
Maybe while people are
Um, I
thinking.
was in.
Oh, sorry,
Oh,
go ahead.
oh yeah. I was just gonna say that like I was like thinking similar along the lines of Lauren too. Is that this webinar really resonated with me? Like when I first started my very first field job, I went on break, and one of the core cutters took it upon themselves to harass me on my days off. And I was like, I am not even at work. Like, why are you doing this to me? And like I felt comfortable to talk to my vice president about it, which like not a lot of people are even comfortable to talk about it. Like you mentioned that lady 20 years later, like that's insane. I That's crazy that they didn't feel comfortable talking right away. Like I said before, I love talking, but um, even still, like just having someone you felt comfortable talking to, it made that whole experience, I guess if you want to call it that, just so much easier to deal with, and made me have a better outlook on the industry. Like Lauren said, so many people come in here and they just have this image tainted of this is bad, this is bad, this is gonna happen, but having that experience right off the bat and it being dealt with, it actually like helped me a lot. So yeah, I feel like this was a good webinar. I loved it. Yeah, just personally. So
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for that.
yeah.
And it's not like you haven't probably had experiences even in the education system, right? Even within university. And I've been called into some universities, engineering or geology departments too. And I think that's so important is to equip people with these skills even when they're still in school, because you're still getting those same behaviors from other
Yeah.
students or even professors. And the inappropriate jokes, when I was in university in 1987, it's like, oh, you're just here for an MRS degree, you're here to find a husband, you're not really here to be a geologist to go in the field.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, that's exactly why I'm here. That's exactly why I'm spending this money for my education. But yeah, there are lots of incidences within university setting so it's really important. I love getting into the universities, talking to the students. I don't try and scare them. Send them running for the hills before they even get in here, but it's to give them that hope that it is getting better. And with your younger generation coming into the industry and having maybe a bit more background, being able to say something or do something, if the university is proactive on that kind of thing, I think
Mm-hmm.
makes it stronger.
Hey, I
There
can do.
was a question that from Sheena in the chat that said, what would be the best way to advocate for someone who wishes to remain anonymous?
That is a really hard situation, and it's really giving them support to empower them. I say that you don't want to solve a situation for somebody, you want to give them the skills to step out, because if they don't have the skills going forward, they're not going to feel safe in a lot of situations that maybe are going to happen to them in the future. If a safety situation, if there has been violence, sometimes you have to report and try to keep their, but the company needs to know that some incident has happened, and you do try to keep that anonymity, and but really encourage them that maybe once the process has started, to say they really want to talk to you about this. And if it's a positive situation and it seems like a real heartfelt um, response from the company, then maybe you can encourage that person. So it's really encouraging them, emboldening them, listening to them, making them feel safe, so that maybe they can step forward.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, Kathleen, you have a
Yeah,
question? You have your
yeah.
hand up?
Thank you so much. I'm all formal here. I really appreciated your talk. That was, and of the work that your industry is doing. I just messaged somebody at our company that does women's kind of leadership discussions, and I was like, we should have Susan come in and talk to us. So yeah, so thank you very much for that. Yeah, your stories were really impactful, especially the underground, not being able to go underground, and just thinking about that as something I've done in my career, and thinking about what would happen if somebody had said that to me. That's a form of bullying and harassment, even if it's just, hey, you're a woman, you can't do this. Um, the other the other thing story that I thought of, not that this is like story time, but just how speaking up and saying something is really important. So back in the early 2000s, I had a job opportunity at the Department of Natural Resources in Nova Scotia, and there had been a sexual harassment case that had happened there. Well, it was like an improper relationship between a student and someone who was working there. So like definitely like a power issue. And the first recommendation I had from somebody applying there was dress very formally. Don't wear anything with a cut shirt. Don't show that you're going to be any trouble as a woman going in for this job, and you'll have a better chance of getting it, because they're very aware of this. And at the time, I just said, "Hey, I'll do that. I really want this job." And I thought that we are not the problem here. Like, why doesn't someone deal with this terrible guy who's, anyway, it was one of those situations where, looking back on it, I would not have said that. I would have said, like, oh, why are you telling me this? Like, why don't we not have, why don't we fix the call issue here? But yeah, it just made me think of, the reason I'm saying all this is because you gave a lot of options for how to approach situations, which weren't always standing up and saying, stepping in, especially if safety is an issue. So I just thought that that was really helpful for thinking about how you would deal with a really complicated situation. So I appreciated the range of options that you provided, that weren't always, stepping between somebody. It could be, like you said, not a cup of coffee, or going to get a supervisor or something like that. So anyway, very much appreciate your talk, and thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Okay, that's great. And yeah, if anybody feels that there would be a good opportunity to go in and work with your company, those enterprise-wide trainings for me are so meaningful, because there's one company that junior exploration company that we work with, and every spring before their teams go out to do their work, they bring us in to do a workshop. And their quote is that it's like learning CPR. It's muscle memory, and it's reinforcing. And everybody, particularly people that are getting newly onboarded for that exploration term, it really helps that everybody in their remote camp is on the same page. Like I said, that's even including the diamond drillers that are in for that season. So that's really incredible that that company is doing that for their employees.
Perfect. Well, again, thank you so much, Susan. That was an incredible talk, and we all really appreciate it. I also just want to thank everyone for joining as well. We really appreciate your time and contribution. If you're not already signed up for the WGC newsletter, I would highly recommend it. There we talk about our future webinars and events. So stay tuned for that. Does anyone have anything else that they want to contribute? Susan, we will be, you will receive a small token of appreciation and thanks from us. So again, thank you so much.
Well, thank you all for having me, and thank you all for joining and listening in on it. And it's a passion, and it's I think it's so important because it's practical, right? There are things that everybody can take away from this, and some of us don't have that voice within front of a lot of people or in front of supervisors and bosses. So yeah, it's giving those other options, and bystander intervention is not just standing up and saying you can't say that. There are so many other options within that framework.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. It's bringing very important and critical aspect and exploration aspect. And so I quite like you mentioned that allyship. So thanks for spreading seed, being educating our allyship, male allyship in the work and university. So I think it's a really important part. So I appreciate all your work. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susan. Yeah, I think it's really important. Like each kind of step of the digger training kind of goes through. You got to think about your personality type too, right? And like what comfort level you're at. It's really great to have such a range of options of like when we can intervene and step in.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you.
Oops. I think I froze there for a minute. Did I?